Greetings. Hello. Wait, why am I doing this introduction to this your podcast?
Welcome to the Groupthink Podcast. Joining us today is Leo, the host of Implicitly Pretentious, and we're going to be talking about the already internet-destroying Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker today. How's it going, man?
I'm alright, thanks. I just peed, and it was like the most burning sensation I've had in a while. But aside from that, I'm alright, thanks. You?
I'm good. Speaking of burning sensations, what did you think of The Rise of Skywalker?
Well, I'm kind of at two minds of it, because I think I'm trying my best to be a glass half full kind of person, right? So, on one hand, there's a half of my brain thinks it was a complete and total mess, because it was effectively very clearly two scripts like crushed into one. And it's not just like two scripts worth of stories, but two films worth of set pieces. So it was like paced ridiculously terribly. But there's also another half of my brain that thought it was kind of smitten by the film, because it was so desperately trying to be liked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's Abrams' MO. Obviously, he more than anything he wants people to like his movies. He's not purposely trying to be transgressive. Everything in here is purposely trying to be like, I know everyone loves all this stuff from the old movies, so we'll bring it all back and consequences be darned. But there's not an ounce of malice in the movie, but I don't think that's helped with the reception. I'm glad we're overall on the same page on the wanting to be nice to this, because I'm sitting over here feeling like one way or the other I got everything I wanted out of this trilogy with The Last Jedi, and this movie really didn't have to do that much to kind of just finish off the story arcs. Really all it needed to do was just kind of resolve the Rey and Kylo storyline, which I think it did admirably. And given everything, and all the movie's best scenes are just dedicated to that. But
yeah, there was a part of my brain that, because I'm on the similar boat. I think I should probably quickly introduce my opinions of the trilogy.
Yeah, we kind of jumped right into this, so,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I wasn't that big of a fan of The Force Awakens. I didn't hate it, but it was kind of like I was very I wasn't really looking forward to this trilogy, because I was like, oh, it's just gonna be quite superficial and built on nothing but flattery. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay, you know what I mean. So going into The Last Jedi, I was really, really quite shocked by how provocative a lot of the themes and ideas of the story was, even though a lot of the creative decisions it made were kind of counterproductive in the long scheme of things, if that makes sense. So looking into this one, I was kind of like, it was more curiosity than excitement. And I think the biggest issue for me with Rise of Skywalker is the fact that it basically it takes The Last Jedi, everything it sets up in terms of the fact that at the end of the film, it's Rey and Leia having to set up a new rebellion. Like that's the premise for the second one, for the third one, right? And this one is like, we're not doing any of that. And it's just going, okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with the Last Jedi, it was setting up a brand new status quo, and Abrams clearly was too in love with all of his ideas to try and address the status quo in any sort of meaningful way. So as a result, it just feels like it's not. I wouldn't say it's nullifying The Last Jedi, because there's a lot of continuation of the themes and ideas in that movie in superficial ways, but but it doesn't feel like it really cares about what that movie was trying to go for, and it just feels like, well, we got the movie down, so let's just kind of wrap up the trilogy with all the ideas I had for the entire trilogy in one movie.
Yeah, what I also thought was kind of weird was that in The Last Jedi, one of the key sort of fundamental things it establishes is that this is a universe that is fundamentally morally irreverent or indifferent, in the sense that characters like DJ and the entire Canto Bight storyline was basically like, okay, without the Jedi, there's no moral, there's no system of morality in place. Everyone just cares about money. And that was the one thing I was kind of like looking forward to in The Rise of Skywalker. I was like, okay, well, a lot of people say that Last Jedi didn't really leave a lot of opening for a sequel. But I was like, well, that's the one opening that I'm looking forward to, is the characters fixing this system. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then this one, I guess everyone was off screen, like, became better, I guess.
Well, this trilogy doesn't really, as a whole, doesn't really acknowledge the state of the galaxy in any sort of meaningful way. Anytime it ever goes back to old planets, it's just to have the obligatory cameo sequence. I thought the if you've ever, I'm sure you've seen the special edition version of Return of the Jedi where they have the parade of every single planet and how they're all celebrating the Empire. And I was kind of expecting something like that to happen at the end of here. But for some reason, the only two planets they show being liberated are Endor and the Cloud City, which that is a bizarre choice of planets to go pick for. It's like what are all the planets from the movies people actually care about?
Yeah,
I guess they've only really visited two planets from the last trilogy that are still existent. So I guess the Ewoks climbed on top of the First Order Star Destroyer and blew it up, or the smugglers at Cloud City. Apparently, they have strong opinions. So,
you think Canto Bight would be like, at least even if most people didn't like it, you'd think they would at least have some sort of reaction, right?
Maybe, yeah. It would be great to see like the reaction shot of the rich people there being like, "Our money, no."
Yeah, or at least have them be like, maybe things are different. Maybe I don't need to make money from war. Perhaps now that the war is over. You know what I mean?
I'm turning a new leaf.
It would be ridiculous, but at least it would have some level of connection.
I think the trilogy kind of started as it meant to go on with the destruction of Hosnian Prime in the first movie, where it's just a complete afterthought. These movies just do not care about what the actual state of the galaxy is in any sort of meaningful way. It's just about Rey and Kylo.
I think the themes are also really, really strange in the way that it travels. Like, the first film was basically the search for identity. The answers for the search of identity is in the past. And then The Last Jedi said, okay, but those questions don't really matter because questions in general are kind of illusions. They're judgments based on some sort of flaw in our identities, and we need to build new identities, find answers for ourselves, or create our own answers. And then this film is like, okay, yeah, but the answers are terrible and we have no power against them. So we have to inherit what we can, I guess?
I haven't figured out exactly what it's trying to say with that answer beyond just rejecting the realization that you have that the aspects of your identity are bad. That's really all I could say. I mean, part of the problem is I don't think J.J. Abrams really understands the story he's telling. I mean, so
they have you ever seen the film The Prestige, by Christopher Nolan? Because
yes, I have actually.
I feel like Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams kind of are kind of similar to the Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale character, in that. Well, like, one of the artists is about, like, I want to tell an illusion to express myself, which is like Rian Johnson and Christian Bale, right? And then Hugh Jackman and J.J. Abrams are like, I want to, like, make people smile and make something, like, flattering and like, exciting for people, right? Is like an audience or the artist kind of priority battle. And this trilogy is, like, incredibly schizophrenic in the way that it conveys any ideas or themes, because it's every single thing they articulate is recontextualized in each film in a way that either opposes or like contradicts the intended meaning from before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, really that's something you could only really pull off like once. And I mean, obviously that was the goal, that was the whole point of The Last Jedi, and with Rise of Skywalker it's just doing it again. So it's just this weird double subversion that doesn't just kind of doubles down on the first movie. So
Well, like, you'd think the last movie would be dealing with the consequences of the first two instead of, like, setting up a new dilemma. That's really, really, like, did no one, were there no editors being like, wait, this doesn't make any, what?
I think it's mostly just a failure of imagination. I don't think that they quite understood how to go with, like, work with the scenario they set up. I mean, that scenario in the last movie should have been pretty simple to work with. Kylo Ren controls the First Order, and he's being pushed within the Order to go more extreme, and the Order is, and he's just completely unstable, and he slowly has to find a way to be redeemed. That seems like a pretty simple way to set up a movie. I mean, I get that with Star Wars, having the ever looming threat of the most evil man in the background is a good. It helps dramatically to make that happen, but this movie could have worked without having the Emperor there. It could have worked with just having these two deeply fractured powers in the galaxy vying for attention and control without the ever-looming threat of just ultimate destruction in the background.
Yeah, well, I think the probably the best, like, the ultimate little gap for the third film to expand upon probably would have been the Knights of Ren instead of Palpatine, out of all things. They had, like, an opening where they could have just been like, okay, the Knights of Ren, they're the real person in charge. If they really, really wanted not to use Kylo Ren as the main villain, if you really wanted to redeem him.
Yeah,
instead they die like in 5 seconds.
I mean, they're there. I mean, it would have been more interesting if this movie had been about, like, Kylo Ren learning to reject the need for him to internally to express himself through the dark side. Like, having the entire First Order and the Knights of Ren around him, just pressuring him to stay dark and to conform to their standards. That would have been an interesting dilemma where you could have just seen him go completely nuts on the First Order and just reject everything, while the First Order is still going to maintain their prerogative, so they still will maintain a threat the entire time.
Yeah. Or at least, I would probably say just jump forward in time by like 5 years and say the war is at an end. The First Order is losing terribly because one thing I kind of really, really liked about The Last Jedi at the end was that after the Battle of Crate, we see the kids on Canto Bight recreating the events with the toys.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool, because when Leia says we have everything we need, well, she's saying that they have an ideology that will attract people, right? It will make even little kids on Canto Bight, like the most cynical kind of place ever, have a bit of hope and imagination. So I thought, like, okay, your next film, you could jump however forward in time you want from the consequences of the Battle of Crate. You could have just been like, okay, we're going to jump forward by 5 years. Things have completely repositioned itself. Everyone has gathered behind the Resistance because the tale of Luke Skywalker single-handedly saving everyone was such a revolutionary event that it disempowers the First Order, and you could just deal with the aftermath of that. You know what I mean?
It seems like no one outside of the Resistance is aware of it.
Well, there was one line that kind of made me like, was when Poe was like, oh, on the Battle of Crate, no one came. It was so sad. And I was like, oh no, I don't think J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio really understood the point of the Battle of Crate.
No.
Like, the point wasn't that no one showed up. The point was that Luke showed up. Like, I was like, ooh.
Yeah, I saw the trailers and I saw the footage of the entire fleet showing up. I kind of thought that was what they were going for. Like, from the outset of the movie, they would just have this enormous fleet of just completely ragtag people that have just decided to join the Resistance for for every reason in the world. And, like, I thought that was going to be the status quo, but
yeah. I think that would have been my movie. If I hate to rewrite films, but I think that probably would have been a more interesting film. Just instead of them going after some plastic artifact in ruins of very nostalgic places, they probably could have. Wouldn't it be cool to see Rey and Poe and Finn? I guess Leia's dead, but just traveling across the galaxy, like creating truces and and spreading the story of the Jedi and whatnot, converting people.
Yeah, I mean, but the way it looks like at the start of the film, really the resistance is kind of like whittled down to Poe and on the Falcon, and then a few fighters, and that's just about it. Which that basically lines up with the last movie. I guess they just had a ship sitting somewhere that they could draw on in a pinch. But
the thing I didn't like about that was that, like, literally at the end of The Last Jedi, it was like, okay, how are we supposed to build a rebellion from this? Okay, the next film is about them building a rebellion. Oh, they never did it, I guess. No. Just hanging out in the jungles, just hanging out.
They sent someone to like one planet and recruited like 10 guys. I guess
Maz Kanata came back. She's like, "Hey, it's me. I'm not gonna tell you the story that I said was for another time."
That's weird. I want to know what happened to her union dispute. That sounded like that could have been a fun story, but. But yeah,
oh, no.
I mean, when it comes to this movie, I'm hard-pressed to say what's authorial intent and what's just laziness. Because I don't think anyone didn't try with this movie. I think that they really tried everything they could, and they just... They had to fall back on what they thought would work, as opposed to what... It's a really complicated knot to untie, and I'm just kind of getting lost in my brain as I talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think, we understand storytelling as a set of terms. I feel like this was an example of a really bad negotiation between what J.J. Abrams wants to tell, what Rian Johnson told, and what the fans want. It's like three points of interest completely colliding into each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
So multiple levels of authorial intent just ongoing. It's fast. That'd be a fascinating to kind of figure out what belongs to who. And I know supposedly there was elements of this film were also influenced by George Lucas because they brought him on at some point in the process to.
Yeah, I heard about that. And Colin Trevorrow too.
Well, I think they threw out his script, but they probably just used the base template of Kylo and Rey get together eventually, which probably was about all they did take. Although they did
wish Colin... I kind of wish, sorry to cut you off, but I really, really wish Colin Trevorrow directed this now, even though Book of Henry was really bad.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same position, even though I didn't see Book of Henry after hearing it was the worst film ever made. Although maybe I kind of want to watch it now just to be like, this guy could have directed Rise of Skywalker, and we could have all had something that was a little more straightforward and cohesive. But
because I feel like this could have followed, even though it's a different sort of animal, I think it could have followed somewhat successfully the Marvel sort of trilogy idea of, okay, the themes kind of follow, but we're gonna prioritize the imprints of different directors first. So you have like a trilogy that flows really oddly in terms of focuses and genre, but it will at least never contradict each other because it's always heading towards something, because someone passes the torch to the next person. But this one, because it's back to J.J. Abrams, it did like a U-turn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that's just because of it's just J.J. Abrams. I mean, if like, I can imagine like a Marvel movie where you got like one of the old Marvel directors on board from like the first phase of Marvel movies to come back. And they just said, hey, we're going to have you do a sequel to one of the characters you did back 10 years ago. They would probably just take a look at the movies and just do a different story that follows the continuation of everything that happened. But it wouldn't be a thematic thing where they just kind of crammed in all the ideas. Like, I doubt if Kenneth Branagh came back for Thor 5... I doubt he'd suddenly resurrect Idris Elba and just try to reset the status quo. Asgard came back from the edge of destruction, so it's going to be about rebuilding the homeland that you righteously destroyed.
Yeah, but I don't know.
I mean, but the weirdest takes I've seen on this movie have been the, oh my gosh, Rise of Skywalker's so bad, I can't believe The Last Jedi ruined it. Have you seen those people? It's kind of funny where the people that are just absolutely radically believe that everything that's wrong with this movie is because because the last movie ruined it.
And I empathize with those people because it's I feel like I feel like Star Wars is like a Rorschach test, where like if you get like 100 people to watch Star Wars, right? Any of the films, or I guess all of the films, you're gonna get like 3,000 different interpretations just from 100 people.
I agree.
Be-
I mean,
because it's like okay, some people like I personally really enjoyed Last Jedi, but I'm looking for like my personal interest of Star Wars comes from like themes and more subtext, and some people prefer like the world building, lore building, like cosmology element to it, and some people prefer the adventure aspects. Some people prefer the space western aspects. Some people prefer this and that and this. So, I mean, yeah, I don't really agree with those people, but I can empathize.
I do too. I don't mean that to say that they're bad people or wrong. I just
Oh
in
yeah,
the sense
absolutely.
that everything that's wrong with the Rise of Skywalker comes from the fact that it is so reactionary and that it is so it just it's born of such a misplaced desire to not want to adapt to the changing narrative of the series. I mean, everyone says that they should have just gone with J.J. Abrams' story treatments for the trilogy, and I'm sitting here like, no, it would have all been like this. I'm like, Abrams would have just made another 2 Force Awakens movies, and then we'd all just be complaining about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I'm quite interested is in the future, in the next sort of couple of decades, how will we look back on the sequel trilogy? Because the prequel trilogy has been like rehabilitated out of like all the possibilities, and I kind of wonder like right now it's kind of like okay, the popular consensus is like the Force Awakens is positively looked at. Last Jedi is deeply polarizing, but in the fan base is largely negative. And in this one, I've seen people that are like more positive towards it from the fan base that didn't like Last Jedi, but then negatively from like the formal critics who liked The Last Jedi. So the way things are organized, I'm deeply fascinated now.
Yeah, I suspect there's going to be another decade-long therapy session, kind of like the ones we did after the prequel trilogy. And I think after a while, if people are just going to stop like having strong opinions about it, kind of like with the prequels, and then what you're going to be left with is just the people that mostly liked it or really hated it. So I imagine we're probably going to look on it just the same way we did with the prequels, where it's just people are just looking at them for what they are and not with the expectations of what they can be or what they could have been. And then it's just at that point the frustrating parts of the trilogy are just not going to bother us anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the moment they start making another 3 films, another trilogy, even though they say this is the end of the Skywalker saga, I kind of doubt it. I give them like 7 years max or minimum, and then they're gonna start making episode 10, 11, and 12.
Well, I mean, they're currently what they seem to have is like plan wise is that they have another movie slated about 3 years out. But the last thing I heard was that they've officially decided to call off trilogies for the meantime, and that they're just gonna start kind of like doing one-off movies of different kind of things. I mean, the one that they keeps getting like going through the rumor mill is the idea of doing a KOTOR movie with like Keanu Reeves or something.
What, as Darth Revan? I've seen fan art of this.
Yeah, I mean, that could turn out really stupid or really cool, and I'm willing to see it happen just for the sake of having a Keanu Reeves Star Wars movie.
I feel like I don't really want to go backwards in time. I kind of want to keep going forward.
I would too. I mean, I imagine what's going to happen is that like 20, 30 years from now, they'll probably call back all the actors from this trilogy and be like, hey, we want to do another revival trilogy. We've been gone for long enough. I don't think people are going to scream at us if we do it now. But I mean, I'm sure they have all these actors on like lockdown. So if they decide they want to do the 4th Star Wars trilogy in 2040, they can. But for now, I would imagine they're probably just gonna kind of play a little bit more closer to the chest, because Given how much, I mean, given how much just the Mandalorian is doing right now, like I think that's going to be the direction they move into.
Just sort of more smaller scale, high budget, concentrated like Star Wars media type stuff.
Yeah, because they have that Obi-Wan Kenobi television show that they're going to start working on soon. So I think they're going to kind of try to see if they do stuff like that that's a little less important to the grand scheme of the narrative, that just kind of satiates the most ravenous fanboys, but still sells in the way the Mandalorian has.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably what will act as a catalyst for Disney to make the next Star Wars trilogy, because I feel like they're just waiting for things to calm down so then they can make more trilogy films. Because that's kind of where the international market is, and that's where they can boast the most in terms of, well, look at me. The new film made $1 billion in the first 3 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that. Has Disney Plus released in the UK yet?
I don't know. I've not checked. I've watched The Mandalorian through completely legal means. So,
that's fair.
I think. I mean, of course, yes, it must be. But I don't know. My guess is that they still want to make films purely on the basis that that's the prestigious kind of money maker, and that's their golden ticket every couple of, because it's like, what, every time they make a new Star Wars movie, that's, well, I get apart from Solo, they're guaranteed to make like around $800 million
at least. I mean, I think Rogue One broke the billion too.
Yeah, well, I think I think Rogue One made $1 billion.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that one did too, in addition to the Saga ones.
So it's like 3 out of 5 out of the new. Was it 5 or 4?
There have been 5 movies with the Rise of Skywalker now.
I bet the Rise of Skywalker is probably going to make bank. It's maybe. I'm not sure if it's going to make $1 billion, but I think it's going to make its budget back.
I know it's getting insanely high opening weekend sales. I think you're right in terms of the bringing back the saga stuff, now that I think about it, because obviously there's an ego aspect that's involved in all of this, where if they just go off on their own and do something completely differently, that could potentially put them at odds with like the legacy of the series. Although I still kind of hope we do end up getting that Rian Johnson trilogy, because I think you do need to have a trilogy that's brought into the world that's coming from someone who has his level of just kind of vision for the trilogy, because I don't think you can keep making movies like this without like a George Lucas mind behind it, who you could just put it. You don't use George Lucas, just put his ideas through like a refinement process, and then spit them out on the other end, and you'll get something that has like the grand operatic structure of that it needs, with that, while still getting the tone and the style right in ways that won't off-put the fan base.
Yeah, I feel like the Rian Johnson stuff is completely dependent on time in his career, because I feel like if he keeps making films like Knives Out, which are like critically acclaimed, beloved, audience pleasers that make money, that trilogy is probably still gonna happen, and people are going to re-examine Last Jedi more positively, because he's like he's going to have like a creative, like a professional identity that isn't just a guy who directed Episode 8, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got that was the feeling he was going for with Knives Out, which is just, I did want to bring this up. It's, that film really came across like him making his first official, like him, Rian Johnson movie. I know he's made like 3 other movies. He did Brick and Looper, and those are great. But I think that this feels like the first like movie that's completely separated from The Last Jedi, that really fully carries his personality into the mainstream and has like a massive reception to it. Like, obviously this kind of came on the heels of, this is the guy who made The Last Jedi as part of the marketing campaign, but as far as I can tell, it's done really well.
Yeah, and I feel like eventually his name as a reputational thing, and with time too, upon retrospect, it's gonna override the cultural identity of Last Jedi, in the sense that people would be like, oh yeah, it's the one where like Ryan Johnson, that guy who directed, Knives Out. Oh, I love that movie. Yeah, he directed a Star Wars film. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
In the same way that like people are like, oh man, did you know Steven Spielberg was going to direct Episode 6? That really sort of wait, what?
Yeah, that would have been crazy to see that. It probably would have been better, but
Yeah.
at least
Well, I feel like he probably would have like he probably would have stood up to George Lucas when he wanted to put in the Ewoks and be like, what?
Oh yeah, I mean, who was, I forget the name of the director, like Richard Marquardt or something like that.
Yes, Richard Marquand. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was clearly just a Lucas proxy, just someone who would like do whatever Lucas wanted and is like, what do you want to do? I have this idea, Ewoks. I'm like,
Well, also apparently Richard Marquand was like really unfamiliar with like special effects heavy films, so.
Really?
Yeah, so apparently like George Lucas had no choice but to really, really have some sort of like creative control over it because he was so inexperienced.
That's fascinating. I have not heard of that, but I'd heard the guy that got picked because he'd done like a war film or something to that end.
Yeah, I think it's called, was it Eye of the Needle or something? Sean Connery's in it.
Okay, that's interesting.
He was like acclaimed, so I don't know why would you get like a dude who made a miserable war film for your light-hearted space science fantasy film. That's really strange.
It wasn't for the his ability to direct actors, I'll tell you that, but I guess it was just because he would be willing to work with Lucas and just kind of do what he wants. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't tell you anything about a Richard Marquardt film in hindsight, like other than his one movie that was critically acclaimed. It's probably one of those like one-hit wonder directors that does something amazing and then they get like 2 more chances in Hollywood and both those movies kind of fizzle out and then they just don't hear about them for a while.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, I guess Irvin Kershner, what did he direct? RoboCop 2?
I know he did Never Say Never, the Sean Connery revival movie for Bond.
Oh, isn't that like an unofficial James Bond film?
To my knowledge, yes, because it's supposed to be either like abysmally bad or there's just something immensely wrong with it. I don't know what.
Yeah. But... I think it wasn't through, was it MGM? I think it was through another studio.
Yeah, I meant the Bond licensing is a little screwy. I just heard bad things about the movie, so I can't speak to it. But but Kershner is always, the funny thing about Kershner was he was always like a small indie director before he did Empire Strikes Back. That's why when he did like that, when he got to Hollywood, they're like, oh, we're gonna stick him on Bond, we're gonna stick him on RoboCop, and they didn't last that long. Just didn't.
Oh no! Okay.
He's really, really good at that one, and apparently he did a lot of. I haven't seen all of his old stuff, but apparently it's all good.
Cool.
But yeah, where were we on?
We're talking about. Should we get to the positives of the Rise? Because we've just been bashing. Didn't we say we wanted like a glass half full kind of approach?
I think we did, and we immediately got lost in the weeds. But yeah, so what is your immediate positive takeaways from Rise of Skywalker then?
I thought Daisy Ridley looked very, very pretty in it. I don't like her outfit. I don't. Why is it the same costume but just white? That feels very bizarrely uncreative. But I like the. Okay, I really like the special effects, and I normally don't ever say that about these films, but I really adored the fact that it was practical effects constantly. I don't think there was a single like CGI alien person in it.
Or at least, I mean they all look like Muppets. It was great.
I was like, that's really good. There's a bit where she was in like a festival, and we just saw a bunch of kid aliens, and it was like, whoa, they're all models, every one of them. It would have been so easy to do a bunch of like CGI Shrek 3 looking kids, but it was like, wow.
I will say that kite festival, I forget where it is, that was probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie, just because it was such a visually interesting and like it was slower than a lot of the other scenes, so it let you kind of just like take in the scenery, and there were so many just like wonderful little cute moments. I loved the kids. Like Disney has gotten exceptionally good at puppeteering little baby creatures that make you want say that make you just like say aw.
Yeah.
Between that and Baby Yoda, it's terrifying, but
I wish it was longer, that scene. I wish the whole, like, this is one thing I kind of I liked and didn't like. I liked the varied amount of set pieces. There's a real sense of diversity in terms of ideas. I feel like J.J. Abrams literally like had like a list of like, oh, this is where I would go. This is the locations I want to do. This is blah blah blah. That could make up like 2 films. I'm gonna use all of them because I really just because he's like I love these ideas so much, and even though it makes for a very messy film in terms of pacing, it was kind of like, whoa, this is gorgeous. Like when they went to that planet, I was with the where the First Order was oppressing, and I was like, oh my god, they actually built like multiple alleyways in the city. I was like, what? And I think on that, like that kind of being like, wow, levels of awe-inspiring set production. I was like, that's really good. It was very refreshing.
It was kind of fun seeing a Star Wars movie where they go to more than like 2 planets. And that's probably not for the best because we don't get to spend that much time with any of them. But I could definitely tell every single one of these planets was, like you said, it's an idea Abrams had. He just had to get out, and so
yeah. I think it's a bit of a breath of fresh air because as much as I like the Marvel films, they all have like green screen cities and backgrounds that you kind of there's a point where they kind of feel the same. This one where just simply seeing light reflect off of a real building that's built, that's designed to look like an alien architecture deal. I was like, whoa, this is like this is immediately immersive in a way that I've not really felt in years watching films.
Yeah, I mean the CGI alone, I thought that was some of the best I think I've ever seen. Like I think that opening shot with the Star Destroyer crashing out of the ice, like the more you just look at the image and realize how much depth there is in that CGI and how detailed it is, it's insane. Like every single image in this movie looks great. I can't impress that enough that this is one of the best looking films, even in the CGI department. Like,
yeah,
it's spectacular. That's part of why I want to be nice to this movie because it's there's so much to it, and
Otherwise, well, I feel like if I dislike it, it feels like I'm like, well, all that it's watching money burn on the screen. If you know what I mean? It's like,
I mean,
all of this for nothing.
I mean, that's kind of blockbuster filmmaking, though. That's kind of what sells. I mean, the people, for like right before the Marvel Cinematic Universe came out, we were in that time where
that's true. Yeah.
So many action movies, like the Transformers movies, there was like no character to them. There was like no actual interesting characters, but the special effects were so complex and interesting. People went and saw it because obviously they just wanted to see the visual aspects of it. Like people go and saw Avatar a billion times, even though there's not that much like story to it. But
I remember as a kid being like watching Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen out of all films and being like my jaw dropped because I was like, oh my god, I've never seen.
Same.
I've never seen like robots look that real. Granted, or a city being destroyed or fighting in the bloody pyramids. It's like, that's whoa.
Yeah.
I think that was one thing I liked about the film. It ignited a very nostalgic feeling of classical, awe-inspiring Hollywood filmmaking.
I think that's like the great intuition of this entire generation of filmmaking is marrying that level of spectacle to soap opera storytelling, and now you get the best of character-driven films and mindless special effects, and you can sell, and it bought like an entire decade of mindless action movies to go for people that want to go see movies that just don't particularly aren't necessarily looking for something more complex in their movies. Because obviously, I don't mean this to sound snobbish, but obviously I think most people, they go into movies because they want to see they want to be entertained more than they want anything else, as opposed to snobs like us that want complex theories and deeper ideas being expressed in their movies, whereas the people want the catharsis of seeing the budget on the screen because you can't just do that at home. if they want to stay at home, they'll watch The Irishman, which has amazing special effects, but it's more character centric, and they don't have to pay for it. So, I think that's what ultimately puts tickets in. It puts the butts in the seats in the movie theaters nowadays, as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, well, I think it was George Miller who said that we're like half the stories in the eye of the beholder. So it's an awkward kind of negotiation when it comes to how mature or deep a story is. And I think, I guess back to episode 9, one thing I kind of like about it was that looking back on it, I did feel like it had a central theme, even if it directly contradicts The Last Jedi, which is the theme of sharing memory and identity. Because the last line of the film is literally, what's her face? It's Rey saying her last name is Skywalker, which is like the film kind of recontextualizing the entire all 9 films, in the sense that now Skywalker isn't about bloodlines. It's still about heritage, but now it's about like a shared identity, a shared cultural identity. And I was kind of like, that's kind of cool. That's kind of a cool little, like, I guess, twist. But it's a cool point of anchorage where the film is trying to communicate, okay, this is what we want to say about Star Wars. Star Wars is about shared identity. And at the end, we're going to literally have the character celebrate that by adopting the name Skywalker. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah, that's somewhat of a carryover from The Last Jedi to a degree, but to me, the thing that kind of struck me was the more of just about how much that it suggests that the movie is just as much about rejecting identity, because obviously it's about the movie carries kind of the Empire Strikes Back reveal of the lineage as its kind of story, to the point where it kind of it retreads some of the ideas from Empire and The Last Jedi, to where Rey decides that she's going to go off onto the island and basically pull a Luke Skywalker, and I kind of wish
which I actually liked. Yeah, I thought that was kind of like, and I really wish that was just like the setting for like a good chunk of the film, because I was like, if that was in Act 2, and if that was like the big kind of twist, where the moment she finds out she's Palpatine, she just goes to the island and stays there, and we have like a really, really nice, intimate character sort of drama in the second act, where it's just her and Luke. I'd be like, you know what? I kind of dig this.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had gotten more than one scene with it, because I think that idea by itself is spectacular. Just the idea that she immediately does what Luke Skywalker does the moment she realizes that she has the ability to fall to the dark side, where she's like, I'm going to shut down and go to the middle of nowhere where no one can find me. And it really needed more than just her talking to Luke Skywalker's ghost.
For like 5 seconds. I remember getting whiplash. I was like, wait, what? He's immediately moving the X-Wing? What? Oh, he's back. Whoa. Oh, she's left. What?
Yeah, I mean, I would have kind of liked it if she'd like brought Kylo to the island. They'd be like, we're just gonna like burn the TIE fighter, and neither of us are gonna talk to anyone ever again. And then they just kind of have some quiet moments to talk, and then maybe like Luke Skywalker's ghost appears then or something like that. Like, I mean, I don't want to be that guy who rewrites another person's movie. But I'm just kind of spitballing, because there's a lot of potential here to expand all these. This movie is like almost like a first draft,
just a first draft. It feels like the script outline, where he was kind of like, okay, let me just put some PowerPoints out and bullet points, and be like, okay, this is how I would have done episode 8. This is how I would have done. As a result, I have to carry some of these bullet points for my episode 9. Okay, how do I do it? Just put it all in the first act. Okay, second act. Okay, well, I have to marry the ending of my episode 8 with the beginning of my episode 9. Just blow through it.
You know, the worst offender in that sense is that there are at least 4 times in this movie where characters are implied to have like a noble on-screen death or sacrifice, and then within half an hour, every single one of them is completely undone. Like,
but also, yeah, like C-3PO and Chewie.
Yeah, C-3PO, it would have been really interesting if C-3PO just didn't have any memory going forward, and that was his new status quo, where he has to be reintroduced to everyone. And that could have been a neat little way to do, like, exposition. Or they could have done, or, as much as I hate the idea of losing Chewie, I mean, commit to an action. Just commit to it. Or even the one with the girl on the mountain planet.
Yeah.
She gives
Zori?
up. I forget. I think it's Zori. Like, she gives up the medallion and effectively sacrificing her life when the planet gets destroyed. And then she just shows up at the end, having not sacrificed anything. I'm like, okay. I'm glad she's not dead, but I kind of undermines the whole point of her giving up the medallion if she just immediately suffers no consequences from it.
Yeah, well, that's the key thing, isn't it? That the film is not really willing to commit to the consequences of its own actions.
Yeah, I mean, I think take out the Palpatine like ticking time clock, like so that this entire movie isn't just taking place over the course of half a day. Take that out. Expand upon the consequences of the characters like having these sacrificial moments, and I think the movie is infinitely improved right there.
But I feel like if they really wanted to put Palpatine in, just keep him as like the big twist in the final climax. Be like, there is someone, but we don't know who. But Rey, like, there may be something more up with it, because I don't like the fact that they've retconned the big twist in The Last Jedi, that her parents were nobody, because it kind of defeats the point of the theme of her character, which is, I have to make my own identity because I've not inherited anything. But
I don't think it inherently undermines that, because by the end of The Last Jedi, she's effectively started building her new identity, and so having her
that's what I wanted to see more of. I just wanted to see more of, okay, what does that mean, making your own identity? And I was, I was like, is she going to become a teacher? Is she going to teach that little kid at the end of Last Jedi? Is she going to find an identity by providing other people identity? Or is it going to be... I don't know. I thought that would have been a rich area of investigation, as opposed to just...
If I'm being charitable, I would say that the movie's answer is that her identity ultimately is found in her rejecting of... it ultimately crystallizes in her rejecting the identity that's being forced upon her, but that's a charitable...
But she's also adopting another identity that's been that's, I wouldn't say handed to her, but I guess it is handed to her in the form of Skywalker. She's not like, at the end of it, she's like, my name is Rey Eisenhower, or whatever, some name she makes up. You know what I mean? Like, I am Rey Renkiller, or like you know what I mean? Like something that, a last name that starts her own legacy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as opposed to just kind of picking up the last one.
Yeah, but I think that's just probably the big difference between Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams, is that these kind of, the iconography of words and visuals means way more than his own sense of creative identity. So now the characters are like the same, they follow the same logic.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just it's a problem of what kind of movie they're trying to, like, what again, I'm getting lost in the thoughts of this. It's fascinating how the movie picks up the themes from Last Jedi in ways that you can tell that I think to a degree Abrams did like The Last Jedi. I think he did want to engage with the themes in that movie, but I don't think he quite figured out the best way to do it from the get-go. And obviously, since he only had like a year and a half to rewrite the movie after Colin Trevorrow left.
I heard it was even less. I heard it was like 2 months, because they had the set deadline, and Colin Trevorrow, because Rian Johnson was making The Last Jedi during the production of The Force Awakens.
Oh, so he literally just pulled a Douglas Adams and locked himself and Chris Terrio in a room for 2 months and just said, "We are not leaving until the script is done. And then
Yeah,
this...
probably while they were writing it, they were like, "We have to start building sets, JJ. You have to write down what you want to be built, because we don't know." And he's probably just like, "Crap. What's exciting? These are just a list of ideas of places that I would have gone before. I'd make these." And then he's like, "Crap. And now I need to write a story around it. And the only way I can really write a story around it is just have loads of exposition. We need to go to this planet. We're going to here. We're going to do that. Blah blah." You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of it's clearly reactionary to... It reminds me of the way, like, I used to write short films, being like, well, I need to make a movie. What do I have available to me? I can shoot on the family farm. Okay, I'm shooting a movie that's set on a farm. So it's kind of like that, where everything is just a response to what you can do as opposed to what he should be doing. I'd be curious to see how this would have played out if they had refined this another couple layers. I mean, I think at one point, like, I remember back in 2015 on the production, I was looking at the production credits, and it said that Rian Johnson was going to write episode 9 at one point. I don't know when that changed, or if that was just Wikipedia being wrong, but...
I think he declined, I believe. I believe he was given the offer, and then he was like, I'm alright. And then they were like, hey, Colin Trevorrow. Like, okay.
Imagine the kind of... discussion we'd be having right now if Rian Johnson wrote the script for a J.J. Abrams movie. That would be...
with J.J. Abrams directing? Because I feel like that would be like the most schizophrenic film, because he would be concentrating on the different things.
Oh gosh.
You know what I mean?
We would have gotten all those weird moments from a Return to the Jedi where the actors are just kind of saying what they want without any sort of like pacing.
Well, like, notice how in this film, in Rise of Skywalker, whenever Rey and Kylo Ren has their, like, Force Skype, it's done in, like, almost every one of them ends in a fight scene, in a sword fight. And I think you can kind of tell, like, J.J. Abrams is kind of distrustful either of the audience or of his own storytelling, where it's like, oh, people can get bored. Are they really going to care about these two people talking? Just fight! You get angry, fight! Whereas, like, in Last Jedi, it was like 2/3 of the film was just a dialogue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could buy Kylo Ren just being instant. Well, actually, no, because Kylo Ren is the entire movie. He's just like, yeah, I don't want to fight you. Just come with me and like join the dark side, so we don't have to do this. So yeah, that is kind of dumb. It's just Rey being unnecessarily aggressive.
Yeah, and I think it's coming from just a different approach of filmmaking and focus, because the point of the Force Skype was to create dialogue encounters, not action scenes. But I think JJ's more excited in the action scenes.
I mean, I like the idea of a cross time and space like fight scene. I think that they did the one, at least one or two of them are fine, but maybe they should have paced the battle a little better. I don't know.
Well, I was just kind of like, ooh, like imagine if he directed like The Last Jedi with Rian Johnson's script.
Oh god.
It would have been like she sees him for the first time and is like, where are you? And she's like, die! And just starts sword fighting.
Oh my lord, that sounds so bad.
Let me tell you about my father. Die! What? Ray, I was just trying to talk. This guy's like shut off and he's like, hey Ray, so I want to talk to you. Die! Like, stop fighting me! Oh like my god.
The epic crossover of Star Wars and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where every character is just completely unstable the entire time.
What did you think of the Star Destroyers that can just blow up planets?
Conceptually, I'm fine with it. It's not a Death Star. I would have liked it had it just been like they blow a hole in the Earth, in the planet's crust, and then the planet just kind of like turns into a magma pit. Like,
yeah, or like it's like they glass it. It's like bombardment. Just they bomb it to the point that it's just like a cupcake afterwards.
I would have been fine with anything that was just kind of like a mass destruction weapon, like, because all I really had to do was do what they did in Rogue One, where they just fire it once and it like mildly damages the surface of the planet. It doesn't have to destroy the entire thing. It just has to like kill everyone on it. It's a matter of degrees. That's really that makes it too much. That like the idea that a single Star Destroyer I'm literally just gonna start quoting Han in the first movie now. It has the firepower to destroy an entire planet. Like that's a little out there, but I mean, at least
I mean, I guess the purpose of it is so then everyone is like, oh my god, we need to fight the First Order. That's what unites the galaxy together. I
Yeah,
guess, but I mean, it now it's unnecessary.
it's just a matter of degrees. Like if they had turned the notch back like 1 degree, this would have been like, okay, they have a fleet of Star Destroyers that will go out and cause enormous amount of death, and essentially the Emperor will just kind of force his way back into power. That's fine. That's not the most egregious thing in the world. Although I'm more kind of curious to find out more about all these people living on the Sith homeworld. Like, they're not all clones. They're not droids. I guess there's just an entire planet that's perfectly fine just being an emperor cult. I guess.
But what does the Emperor do on it? Does he just like does he how does he eat? Does the stormtrooper come out with sandwiches and juice? I don't.
He's plugged into his life support chair. He seems to be doing okay.
Does he have like a PS Vita with him? Like, what does he do for entertainment? Does he just look into this? Like, what?
I guess he's busy just kind of mind controlling everyone in the galaxy that he personally cares to, because apparently he was just mind controlling Snoke the entire time and talking with Kylo Ren pretending to be Darth Vader. So
why does he also like tell the galaxy that he's alive? You would think he would be like, oh, I'm gonna stay super secret until my big plan can be unveiled. Instead, like, what did he say? He's like the first words are like in the title crawl is the dead speak, but what did he say and why did he say it? Was he like, I'm back, guys?
We should have seen that in the movie. That should have been like a major plot point. Like maybe if they, again, rewriting, but like maybe have like a scene where like the First Order is fighting the Resistance, and then all of a sudden every single transmitter turns on and it's the Emperor, and he's like, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to murder all of you. I mean, we should have seen it. Yeah. That's the kind of thing where actually seeing it depicted in the film would have made it a little more interesting,
or at least understand why did he say it? Was he just like, I'm so awesome, everyone's gonna love me when I'm back? Whoa!
I guess his idea is that in the original, the prequels, his idea was to be like subversive and like make himself look like the victim of the Jedi, so that they would willingly want to serve him, as opposed to trying to strong arm the Senate into giving him power. So here he's just like, all bets are off. I'm just gonna go full totalitarian monster and just invade everywhere at once. I which if they had articulated that a little better, maybe, but. It feels like a very different strategy from what he would have tried before.
Well, one thing I did like is I liked it when Han came back. Not only because I was surprised, but I didn't really like his death from The Force Awakens. Mainly because the dialogue felt so cliched and like it didn't really have any sort of artistic intimacy to it. But I was like, you know what? Him coming back as being the triggering point that gets Kylo Ren to turn good, and also reusing that kind of dialogue that I didn't really like before, and recontextualizing it, I was like, that kind of works. I kind of dig it.
That moment was really good. I mean, like we've never seen anything like that in a Star Wars movie, but I think it works perfectly fine. Well, now that I think about it, he's standing right next to the chamber that apparently causes people to see Force visions. So maybe there is like a in-universe thing to it. I don't know.
I imagined it was just like a memory, in the sense that he was literally reliving one of his biggest regrets in his life, and he's giving it new meaning, and he's finding peace from just simply hearing the same words, but giving it a different ending.
I mean, it's a lot like the same scene that played out in Batman vs. Superman, where he just goes on top of the mountain. Which it's not a bad scene. I'm just curious about it artistically, because these movies are pretty naturalistic. They usually wouldn't have a scene of a character dialoguing with his memory as a metaphor like that up until now. So
one thing I kind of wish this film had that Batman v Superman had in that scene was an anecdote, because I kind of dug how like in that one it was a real like father and son, let me tell you a story and let you inherit some meaning from me personally, some lessons. This one, I mean, I like the fact they reused the same dialogue, but if it had something a little bit more emotional weight in what it's communicating, it would have, you know, probably would have been a lot better.
I think the point of that scene and the previous one, which I was slightly confused as to what Princess Leia did in her final seconds, but I guess what the point of that and him seeing Han is that it's just him untying the knot that was his fear that the people he betrayed would never forgive him, and it's just him seeing the last possible semblance of them one last time, and them coming up to him saying, "We love you. We don't feel betrayed by you, and we want you to overcome this." And that ends up setting him on his final mission to find Rey and stop Palpatine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Leia just simply calling out his name is what kind of just saying Ben is what that was what she tried to do. I think she kind of knew, like, just simply hearing her voice and seeing her one last time would be enough to like, that's the last thing she can do.
I swore I thought we were gonna see like a force projection of her for like half a second there. I'm like, is that what this is gonna lead to? It's just her force projecting herself to Ben and then dying. I mean, that kind of would have worked a little better than what happened, but
yeah, I mean, I bought it enough, knowing the limitations of the Carrie Fisher situation.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, they're gonna use it. It kind of works on a meta level, considering the fact that as the audience, we're gonna have kind of an emotional reaction, knowing that that's her last scene in the entire series, both as a person in real life and as a character. So there's a bit of weight in the storytelling mechanism, but in terms of like the in-universe bit, it's so sketchy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately why they got Harrison Ford back for that one scene, just because they needed some way to get the information across that probably would have been part of a conversation between him and Carrie Fisher had she survived long enough to shoot the film.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was going to be Luke, because at the end of his last line to Kylo in Last Jedi was "See you around, kid." So I thought, okay, that's him. Oh, okay. I guess when he said "see you around," it was more a joke than something he was actually planning to do.
It's just him being snide. I mean, I'm kind of surprised we didn't see them like reunite as Force ghosts.
Yeah, you think that would be the final shot, right? The three of them again, kind of like how at the end of Return of the Jedi, it was three Jedi ghosts.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't like pay everyone to come back for like one last Force ghost scene. Like, hey, what's Samuel Jackson and Liam Neeson doing right now? Can they want to get a couple $100,000?
That would be hysterical. Ray would be so confused. Like, who are you? Like, what?
I guess you would just see like hundreds of people in Jedi robes and be like, "It's all of the Jedi."
I mean, I thought that was what I thought was going to happen. You know, when we all heard, when we heard the voices of all the different Jedi in her mind while she's staring into the sky, I thought we were genuinely going to see them all come back.
Yeah,
like as projections. And they'll be like, "You can do it, Rey! Yeah, woo!"
I'm legitimately surprised they didn't. Like, they got Liam Neeson's voice for the movie, so they didn't want to just bother to have him like show up for one day.
I lost it when they had Hayden Christensen, because I grew up with the prequels. So even if everyone hates them, I was like, oh my god, it's his voice. Whoa!
I hope they get him back for the Obi-Wan series. That'd be kind of funny.
Oh, that would be. Imagine like just having a flashback, just one adventure between them.
Oh yeah, that'd be fascinating to just go have like them in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, because that was like what? Just an opening battle in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Imagine like having like an episode where like, you know, Obi-Wan is taking a dump and he's like, you know what? There was this one time when the shit I'm taking looked like a moon, and Anakin was there, and we were hanging out with Commander Cody, and then because like I think we heard Ahsoka Tano's voice in it too, right?
Yeah, apparently in canon she survived the Galactic Civil War, and she's been running around the galaxy not as a Jedi, which is kind of irritating, because now I'm like, okay, one of the most powerful characters in the entire series existed for the entire duration of the rebellion and never had a confrontation with Vader again. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Like that.
I mean, but could you imagine though if that was if we did in the Obi-Wan series, they had a flashback episode, and it was Hayden Christensen's Anakin with Ahsoka Tano.
Everyone would be so confused though. Everyone who hasn't seen the Clone Wars anyway.
I know. I guess they could just explain, like, "Hey, Anakin, you're a princess," and then just look at the camera and be like, "If you're confused, please consult these episodes from Star Wars Clone Wars. That's also on Disney Plus."
Oh my gosh. I can only imagine how confused anyone that isn't a complete nerd handled the Darth Maul cameo in Solo. Like,
I was confused and I knew what he was referencing. Because I was like, seriously, you're gonna connect your $200 million film with like an episode of a CGI kids show? That's good, but I mean, like, you're doing an Obi-Wan series. You're gonna do something with a live action Obi-Wan, but that him fighting Darth Maul happened in Rebels. Are you gonna like recreate it, or are you gonna contradict it?
I mean, Rebels suggested that he was just kind of a hermit after he lost his crime empire, so I don't know when that happened now.
Oh, I was like, what? I don't know. That's I'm hoping they just recreate. I don't know. Actually, I take it back. I don't want to have any assumptions, because
no, I mean, the problem with something like Rebels is that there's kind of like this innate, like, nihilistic underpinning to the whole thing, because at some point all these characters are dying because they don't show up in the original movies, but their solution has just been that they keep feathering the ghost into the background of all these massive action scenes. Like, I'm pretty sure you see the ghost in Rise of Skywalker, at least
really.
Once. Yeah,
oh, I didn't know that. I know we see it in Rogue One.
Like, watch the trailer for I think the second Rise of Skywalker trailer. You see a ship that's the same class as the Ghost in the trailer, and I know it's in Rogue One, so I guess the implication is just that Syndulla just keeps running around in the background of these movies.
I guess.
But everyone else is dead.
Oh my god!
It's so strange. I mean, that I don't want to crap on Rebels because it's its own thing and it's fine, but it's just when you don't think of the full consequences of everything in the universe, it just creates all these weird, like, questions, like, yeah, I wonder why Ahsoka Tano didn't fight Darth Vader on the Cloud City. That would have been nice.
Yeah, she was eating sandwiches and drinking juice. They should do that with a special edition. Just like, what was Ahsoka Tano doing, and just have like her doing really mundane things. Like, I wonder if someone needs help as Luke's getting his goddamn like hand chopped off.
Oops. There's only like 2 Jedi left in the galaxy. Actually, there's the third one that you never heard of because we don't talk about her. But she's not part of our club anymore.
Oh, why not have it on like Cloud City just hanging out? And then when like Luke falls down and lands on the radar dish, she loses her TV. And she's like, oh.
I kind of hope that the 7th season of Clone Wars hangs a lampshade on all this, just to kind of make this a little more comprehensive, but
I guess, yeah. Well, I mean, that was one thing. As a kid growing up with the prequels and watching the Clone Wars show, I was always kind of like, this is so weird that we're having all these fun, light-hearted adventures, but we know this is gonna end miserably.
Yeah, like, that's kind of the fun, like, problem. Like, it's a problem, but they occasionally write it into the narrative where it's just you know that they're just marching into oblivion. There's entire episodes dedicated to like what Kit Fisto's adventures, and it's like, well, he's gonna get murdered by Palpatine. There's episodes about Plo Koon. We know he's gonna get murdered by his own men. We got episodes of like Kaidi Mundi. Oh, he gets gunned down. Which, as much as it's like kind of weird and dysfunctional, as a kid, I actually kind of liked that, because it was so like, it was so out there, and so it made me so uncomfortable as a kid that it forced me to look at fiction a little bit differently. It's like, oh my god, things don't work out. It adds to the prequels. I mean, I think half the prequel love is just people watching the Clone Wars and then remembering the prequels in the context of liking the Clone Wars. So because it adds a lot of depth to them, realizing that all these characters like Kit Fisto and Plo Koon are, when you see them just get massacred in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, and I think you also have to look at stories, or very specifically the prequel stories, with a different set of attitude, in knowing that nothing is forever. These characters are gonna die, and having grown up with superheroes where the status quo is like the most important thing to return to, that was like a revolutionary thought as a kid. Like, oh, it's not forever. Like you have to be able to treasure the present moment you have with these characters, and it's like, oh, you have to find catharsis in knowing that just simply seeing Obi-Wan and Anakin smiling at each other, you have to treasure that, because they're going to be worst enemies in the future. And wow, that's kind of, I'm pretty sure that's not George Lucas' intended vision or intended message of him making $1 billion from clone trooper action figures. But as a kid, I was like, whoa.
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing about Lucas, is that there's always that kind of question, is how much of this is authorial intent, because he did have the yes and no answer on every single creative decision, but like, how much of this is him versus how much of this is the money he's about to make off of the Clone Wars. And there's an interesting tension there where it's never quite clear, but it's easy to be cynical.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, well, sorry, what?
I was gonna go ahead and say what you were saying. I was gonna ask you about the Mandalorian real quick before we kind of finished up. So
I was gonna say George Lucas. It sounds like Kermit the Frog. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
We need to do the we need to do something like those. Did you ever see those like videos of Jordan Peterson where they put his voice over Kermit? We need to do that with George Lucas now. We did it with George Lucas talking.
Everyone hates me. I keep making new Star Wars movies and everyone hates them, and then I stop making them and they say they want new Star Wars movies, but then they just hate me again.
So I sold it to Disney so that a hack could make movies that make everyone mad. I got revenge in the end.
I sold it to Disney and I gave them my plans and they threw it in the toilet. I thought they would really do my plans. But...
Jokes on all the fans that criticized me for all those years.
I want to give him a hug. I feel kind of bad for the man.
Oh yeah, that's like.
He looks so sad in every single interview.
Did you ever watch The People versus George Lucas, the documentary?
Oh yeah, isn't he making a Disney one now? The same guy.
Supposedly, they've been saying that for like 5 years, and now I'm super interested to see it because it's gonna have the whole context of the fact that all this is behind us now. That people.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be a completely different thing now, where because now have the argument of cultural ownership versus artistic ownership is it has a completely different context in the aftermath of watching just how badly that damaged George Lucas and how that argument plays out in a post J.J. Abrams world.
Yeah, well, also it's also in the age of the internet. That's like a whole other can of worms. Because now there's a business in talking about Star Wars and being mad about Star Wars, in fact.
Oh, yeah.
That's, I wonder if he's going to tackle that, because has that exacerbated things or has it reflected things? It's kind of an interesting area to investigate.
I hope he does. I mean, I obviously the questions are going to, there's more immediate questions, but it just depends on how much of a thumb does that director have on like the pulse of the internet? Because like even like Plinkett was starting to notice towards the end when he stopped doing his reviews, like he notices like, yeah, you guys are kind of doing the same thing I'm doing, but way faster and more aggressively. And I mean,
but wasn't like the entire first half of like Mr. Plinkett's review of Episode 7 was just him criticizing Star Wars internet media?
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
Honestly, that was like the best of his stuff recently. Like I once he actually gets into his reviews of 7 and 8, I don't find them that interesting because he's just kind of saying a lot of the same stuff as everyone else.
I feel like he's kind of dispassionate about, because I love his prequel reviews. Even though I'm deeply nostalgic for those films, they're so they're so creatively sharp and passionate. It feels like when you watch his Episode 7 and 8 video, they're a bit obligatory feeling.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he took a break while they were shooting Space Cop, obviously, but
Yeah.
I mean, those videos were at the cutting edge of like the internet like review culture, and I think my favorite moment of the Force Awakens review was when he realized that him criticizing the prequels probably contributed to the culture that got Star Wars sold to Disney. He's like, "I'm sorry, George, I didn't mean to send an entire mob after you."
Yeah. I mean, I liked it when he like was it shat all over J.J. Abrams and George Lucas. Was that the end? Which is something I thought was very strange entering into his episode 8 review. There were no like short film live action element to it.
Yeah, I mean, between that and his Ghostbusters review, I think he just kind of he felt like he needed to get those reviews out more than he felt the need to like do them as like full films like he used to do.
Yeah, I feel like it is kind of I feel like he probably enjoys talking about it on Half in the Bag more than having to make these mass video essays, considering the fact that the video essay market is so competitive now.
Yeah, I mean, Half in the Bag and what's the other one he does? I'm forgetting the
Best of the Worst.
Yeah, both of those shows do insanely well. So I think that it's just that they kind of want to move on to different things, and that the Plinkett stuff has just kind of run its course. Like I think that's why he kind of called the Last Jedi review his last Plinkett review, just because he's like, yeah, I'm kind of just done. Like we've said everything you want to, and I'm taking the opportunity to boycott it just because I'm done.
Well, also like watching his Last Jedi review, it felt kind of like obligatory. Like it felt like his opinion was still being formed, but he was like, "Well, people want me to make an episode 8 review, and I'm not sure if I like this film, and there's a lot I don't like, and people are talking about. I guess I would do a video about it."
Yeah,
a bit longer.
It's very like he's just kind of doing the same like plot logic picking that a lot of other people are doing.
Yeah, I also want to make a point that I love Red Letter Media.
Oh yeah,
Mike Stoklaz is like my freaking. Oddly enough, it just makes me sound so young, but he was like my teenage hero as a kid.
Oh,
I was like, oh my god, like this man from Milwaukee is who drinks beer and looks really sad all the time. It's like, wow, what a hero.
Well, I still hold out hope as the Chicagoan that I'm gonna run into him randomly at some point and just thank him, but
I feel like that's gonna be so awkward because he's so normal. He's like, oh,
yeah,
thanks.
I mean, the subtext of all of his reviews is like this kind of self-awareness that the thing he does on the internet is very kind of flippant and not that important, and that it's very hacky. So I imagine if anyone actually came up to him in real life and said, "Thanks, I love what you're doing," and he'd probably just be like, "Why?"
Yeah. Well, he doesn't buy into the glamour of it at all. He's just a guy. I don't think he's not like one of those people that's constantly tweeting all day or.
No, he sells himself as kind of a hack. Like a lot of that's kind of the image of Red Letter Media, is that they're all like self-aware of the fact that the internet commentary scene is just really hacky.
Yeah, but I think that self-deprecation ironically makes them not hacks, because that they're motivated by sincerity as opposed to like money making.
Oh yeah, I mean when that's why everyone went and bought Space Cop when it came out. It's just because everyone loves what they do and they know they're sincere, even though they're making fun of themselves constantly. It's like, yeah, we're just a bunch of people that shoot wedding videos that live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But, like I think that's what they did before they did the Plinkett reviews. I think they were just like a little video company.
I think so, yeah. Who did like short film competitions and stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, then they turn into like a millionaire giant, and suddenly like Ryan Johnson's commenting about them on Twitter. Apparently,
really? Oh yeah.
Apparently, he said something to the effect of like, yeah, I know he mentioned the review is like, I love those guys, but they scare me. So
Oh no.
I'm like,
oh no.
I mean, that's kind of something that I've wanted to talk about for a while too. Is that like, I'm 90% sure that every single person that works at Disney was forced to sit down and watch the Plinkett reviews at some point, because you see aesthetically and like choices in those movies that are clearly things that Mike has mentioned in his videos.
Yeah, like, well, one of them was the whole "I don't like things that are different" or like, how about you just tell a simple story about good guys fighting bad guys instead of all this complicated politics stuff?
I mean, he literally said in his Star Trek '09 review that J.J. Abrams should direct Star Wars. He literally said the most physical example I saw was like when he talked about the lightsabers in his Attack of the Clones review. He's like, why does no one have different weapons? Why is there a universal weapon for every single person that fights in this universe? And then in this universe, and then the sequel trilogy, every single character with a weapon that's vaguely related to a lightsaber is completely different. So
yeah.
I'm mostly certain that Disney is just like, take notes. We gotta take notes. This guy knows it. This guy knows what's up. We're gonna do a J.J. Abrams movie with the Knights of Ren, and it's gonna look like Star Wars, and it's gonna be an exciting action movie. And I'm like,
is that why Mike Stoklasa immediately said it was everything I wanted in his Force Awakens half in the bag review? Because they literally made a check. Because I feel like that's probably what Disney did. They were like, let's just look at let's pull up let's hire a bunch of sociologists and PR people, and we're just gonna have them watch as many like online Star Wars criticism videos about George Lucas, and we're gonna just make a massive spreadsheet and then mitigate as many of those problems as possible right out of the gate.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I know Lawrence Kasdan wrote The Force Awakens, so I'm genuinely curious to see how much actual creative control he had in that movie.
Yeah, I feel like he probably didn't have any.
Well, I mean, it's
I bet they were just like.
There's a reason Lawrence Kasdan hasn't written for a decade prior to that movie coming out. He probably won't write another one after Solo, so.
I bet they were probably like, hey, Lawrence Kasdan, can we put your name on this? We'll give you like $500 million. Oh, yeah, sure. Let's give you an absurd. You don't have to do anything. You just maybe like we'll come up with a script, and then you can just like do a read through of it. Maybe change some dialogue, change how like Han Solo says, and he's reading it, and he's like, oh, Han Solo wouldn't say YOLO. Okay, yeah, I can change that. Oh yeah, look, you're a writer. You've got the writing credits now.
Be sure to add the line, I have a bad feeling about this at some point.
Yeah. Because I was kind of like, what? Because I remember watching Force Awakens in the cinema and being like, why did they get Lawrence Kasdan to write this? It feels like it was written by the producers.
They did it for a purely placative gesture. Because they're like, oh, he wrote the Empire Strikes Back and Return to the Jedi. So let's get that guy back so we can recapture the Star Wars magic.
Yeah.
At least in theory.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think if you look at his credits, he hasn't written a movie since like 2000. So.
He probably doesn't have to, because he's going to still get the revenue from Empire Strikes Back DVD sales and whatnot.
That, and if you look at all of the credits past like The Last Crusade, they're not good. They're not good movies.
No. Well, he's like in
Dreamcatcher, the movie that inspired The Force Awakens.
Oh no. I guess I don't know. He's like a rich Californian like writer, isn't he? So he's probably just like, it's fine. Just spends all day playing golf.
I mean, cocaine costs a lot of money, man. I mean, you can only spend about a decade of cocaine usage before you need another blockbuster. I feel like
I need to clarify. I'm sure Lawrence Kasdan's a very nice man, and he's a very talented writer. Just don't.
I'm
if
sure.
anyone disagrees, feel free not to tell me.
For legal purposes, I'm sure Lawrence Kasdan didn't do all the cocaine, because we already know that Carrie Fisher did all the cocaine. So we don't need to. It's probably not his fault.
To the point that you can actually see unclipped fingernail in some of the shots that you normally use to like get the cocaine straightened out.
Oh my gosh. Poor Carrie Fisher.
Yeah. I feel like they probably shouldn't have used her in Rise of Skywalker at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think they needed to have at least one scene where they addressed her relationship with Kylo Ren, because it was clearly set up in the previous two movies, but...
Well, if it was up to me, I would have opened the film with Leia's funeral and have that be the inciting incident immediately. It's like, okay, Leia's dead. The new resistance that's been built from the ground up is in a precarious position. Poe needs to become the new leader, and Kylo Ren, having become the supreme leader, is having to face if he wants to be or not. And that would be like the main emotional thrust.
Well, there you go. That probably would have done it better, because I think looking back on it, we're probably going to look at it as really not a good idea in hindsight.
Well, the dialogue is so clearly written around the deleted scenes.
Yeah, that's just. I was hoping it wouldn't be obvious in the movie, but it is so obvious.
There was one bit that I did kind of like, but it was kind of like, ooh, like cringy. Was when she was like, "Be a little bit more optimistic," and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, of course, everything's gonna work out great then, ma'am." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of smart because you're playing with the obvious in a way that is just completely out in the open." I mean, at the same time, I was also like, "Ooh, just now you're raising attention to it."
Credit where it's due. The quips in this movie are really good. Like, I laughed a lot. I probably shouldn't have, but I did.
Did My Cinema, everyone laughed when it was revealed that Rey was Palpatine's granddaughter.
Really?
Everyone laughed. It did not. It completely fell flat on its face in a way that never, like, I don't think I've seen before in a cinema.
I mean, in my theater, there was like at least 2 other people around me that were just like.
The only time people did that was when Han came back. People were like,
I mean, I'm an American movie theater, so maybe that's just my country's fault. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Because in the UK, everything's quite like formal. Like I remember watching Infinity War, no one cheered. I remember watching Endgame, no one cheered.
I mean, Infinity War is a really dour movie. I can see why no one would necessarily like want to cheer for most of it, other than maybe like when Captain America shows up for the first time or something like that. But
yeah, but like you go on like YouTube and you look up like Thor arriving in Wakanda, and there's like, oh, in India, oh, in America, oh, in this and all these different countries, everyone just went nuts. I remember in the English cinema, everyone was just like, okay.
Oh, maybe that's just your country's fault then.
I think so, yeah. Well, everyone's like very formal, like they're like, oh, you know, shh, don't do that, you know. Who's that?
I just watched I Hate Everything's review of Rise of Skywalker yesterday, and he made a joke about that being like, and here in British cinemas, everyone was entirely quiet the entire time except for one guy who would not stop laughing and not stop crying, because we are miserable people. But did you see that review?
It's true. No, I haven't. No, I'm very out of the loop recently with online reviews and whatnot.
Okay, I'm following just about everything because I'm really curious to see how everyone's responding to this. And
I think I need like to wait. I feel like I need to wait about like because the only review I've seen is the Jeremy Jahns review, and I think the Chris Stuckman one.
Yeah, those got out really early. I mean, those guys are like some of the only YouTube people that actually have like critic screening access, so they got them out like days before the movie, thankfully.
And I think they're also the 2 only people left that comes from the old classic I'm in front of the camera kind of like stripped down reviews. I don't think that really works now.
Kind of,
he's not gonna get the views.
They're kind of old fashioned by modern standard, because nowadays the thing is just to have like an avatar and just like talk for 5 hours
or have the trailer on loop or something.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could probably think of a couple other people that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe people. Yeah, I mean, the video scene is changing a lot now. I hadn't actually thought of that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna wait a couple of months before getting into watching the big reviews of The Rise of Skywalker, because I feel like I need to develop my own perspective, if that makes sense. Because it's one of those films where it's like, I remember coming out of it being like, that was really overwhelming in terms of just pure information. Like, it didn't feel, it was like walking out of Last Jedi, it felt like having a nice full meal. This one was like overstuff and indigestion.
Yeah.
I mean, what? Like, I'm not digesting what stuff happened, but it's so hard to remember what happened because there's so little amount of conversations. I can remember images and sword fights, but what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's not that much to grab onto for most of the time, so it's hard to remember everything exactly. But
yeah, and it was so fast. It was like, yeah, okay, Han showed up. Wait, he only came back for like 5 seconds. Okay, yeah, that was the scene. What did he say? I can't remember. It was too fast. Oh, I think it sounded like the Force Awakens dialogue. Oh, Luke comes back.
If there's
Okay,
one, you brought up George Miller earlier. If there's one takeaway from this movie, it's that Mad Max Fury Road, done in that style as any other movie, could have messed up immensely. And see, I think this movie was kind of trying to do something like that, where it's just constantly action scenes and constantly propulsive. Like you even kind of see it in like the speeder car chase in the desert.
Yeah. But I was reminded more of Star Trek Into Darkness.
Oh,
where
yeah.
I think where like J.J. Abrams is like, I know exactly what to do when I'm given a weak script. I just need to plow through it as quick as possible and keep it as exciting as possible. Because I feel like he's like a really good magician. I'm gonna make you look at something going on over here while I'm doing while the illusion breaking stuff is happening over here, but don't look at it because I'm doing something over here.
He's a really sneaky magician, because I think that's like cinema is like that's kind of all cinema in a way, is just keeping the audience's attention on one place and then giving them something they weren't expecting. But
yeah, I think it also comes from the motivation behind the illusion. Is it kind of is the illusion coming from a place of expression, or is it coming from a place of distraction? And I feel like he's really, really good at distracting you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there are some artists where you watch their movies, like The Dark Knight or like with Christopher Nolan, and the movie is so engaging, and then by the end of it you can just think like, well, the plans doesn't actually fit together, but the movie is like, Joker's plan doesn't actually make sense in any sort of meaningful way, but the movie still works because the themes and ideas are holding it together, and it's still dramatically functional. And I think that's kind of the same with J.J. Abrams, where in the moment nothing necessarily bothers you, because it's quippy and exciting, and nothing about it is viscerally off, and then it starts kind of creeping in afterward.
Yeah. Well, I think that's his trick. It's just
it's kind of the opposite of the prequels, actually.
Well, where it's just everything's lingered on for like 10 minutes.
Well, the prequels, like those movies, they were immediately frustrating, and then they got more interesting over time when you started to figure out what the actual artistic intent was. And these ones, they're engaging immediately, and then over time it just starts decaying.
Yeah, well, I think that's the difference between making something that you want to tell versus making something that other people want to see. Because George was like, I'm just gonna make what I want to tell. Like I'm really annoyed by George Bush and the American government, so I'm gonna literally make a movie about where Anakin will literally say, "You're with me or you're with the terrorists." Okay, it doesn't say terrorists, but he says, "You're with me or you're against me." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
I'm literally gonna have Padme say, "This is how democracy dies. It comes from a round of applause." Like,
that is a pretty good line, but
yeah, but like you can tell he's saying something, even if it's like kind of so transparent in like a in an incompetent way. It's an honest place.
Yeah,
it's deeply. It's a form of communication.
It's the weirdest combination of very cynical but very honest. So it's like oh, I see exactly what you're saying, and it's coming from a place of genuine concern and belief. I'm like, good job, George.
Yeah. Whereas I feel like if we're going to look back on The Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, there's like, okay, well, it doesn't really tell you about... Like, J.J. Abrams isn't really saying anything about anything about them. It's like, apart from his love for the franchise, it's not really saying something about the world that he's living in.
I mean, I think the best thing the sequel trilogy is going to have going for it is that people are going to forget about it relatively quickly.
Yeah, or maybe it'll be a really good case study of like commercialism in terms of like, okay, look at how look at the struggle that comes from making a piece of art that's supposed to also be effectively a business proposition. Because that's what The Force Awakens was. It was effectively a rebranding of the franchise in a familiar way, which is, I think, why a lot of people liked it. It was so naked in its commercial intent that people were able to be like, okay, ticks all my boxes that I want.
I really cannot wait for like 5 years out from now when we finally do get like this generation's equivalent of the People versus George Lucas, or this generation's equivalent of the Plinkett reviews, when we actually just start kind of like mass examining what the sequel trilogy really means as a culture and culturally, and we start actually like really cutting into it in the way we've cut into the prequels.
Well, I can't wait until, and there's nothing against the channels that make money or have made a respectful living from making videos like Kathleen Kennedy destroyed Star Wars and whatnot. More power to them, and I respect their ability to make a lot of living out of what they enjoy. But I kind of can't wait till that kind of dials down. That's sort of the shouting culture, and we can kind of just sort of stand back and look at these films as dysfunctional and as functional as they are as films, as opposed to an emotional object, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the re-examination of this trilogy is going to be where the most interesting discussion comes from, more than just like what's happening right now.
Yeah, because I feel like the moment anyone tries to say anything that's outside of what's the dominant argument, it's like you're like you get involved in the argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's also going to help that that we're probably going to get some more like placative stuff in the next couple of years that just kind of calms the fan base down. Like, I'm sure when we get like now that we kind of know what all the big secrets of this trilogy are, now I'm sure the paperback mill is going to go completely nuts, just exploring every single like story opportunity. Like, we're going to get the book where we find out about Luke Skywalker and Lando going on secret missions to find Sith artifacts and fighting Jedi hunters, and I think that stuff's gonna like really entertain people and make them a little more happy. We'll get the book about Luke Skywalker and Leia training, and we'll finally get a lot. We'll get a lot of the stuff that we got like in the early 2000s with the huge run of books, and I think that's gonna like make a lot of people happy just to kind of have more just like naked answers. Just
because that's one of the weird things about this trilogy is that it exists both in isolation and completely dependent on the original trilogy. So I think if they start allowing those connections to come in a way that is similar to what people like before, there's going to be that kind of a more successful assimilation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I did want to, before we kind of sign off, I did want to talk a little about The Mandalorian and what you're thinking, their thoughts on that are.
Well, I've only seen the first 2 episodes, and I enjoyed it. I was a bit kind of like, oh man, can they stop playing the theme again? I like the theme, but it was just like, why? It's gone every 5 seconds. But I really, really am enjoying it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts as a whole on that are, because it's very, like, as it goes along, it gets very similar in tone to Clone Wars, in kind of the way.
Really? Like the show or the films?
The show. I mean, like, just because.
Okay, we're not gonna have.
It's written. It's also written by Dave Filoni, who wrote Clone Wars and Rebels. So it has a very similar story structure style to it, where not a lot happens every single episode, but there's always at least like one moment that furthers the plot along at any given. So it always feels like it's developing slowly, and then just kind of like lets the wheels spin so you can enjoy the world that it's building.
Okay. We're not gonna have the Mandalorian guy talk about space taxes for 10 minutes.
Well, there's a lot of interesting world building details. Like, more than anything else, like, Mandalorian feels like an expression of world building in Star Wars more than even just a story, where it's just kind of like letting you just hang out in this world. And I mean, I can't think of another show that would make an entire episode on the Jawas interesting.
Yeah, well, that was, I kind of was blown away by that, because I was like, wow, this doesn't feel like a show made now, because I feel like people would be mad. He's like gunning the Jawas, and then he kills a big CGI elephant, gets the eggs. Oh, they bloody ripped the egg open to eat the insides. I was like, yeah. Whoa, this is brutal. But it's so like honest and sincere, because you can tell they've prioritized their love for this universe over like whatever the current cultural sensibilities are.
Yeah, I mean, it's all born of like a weird desire to kind of like extrapolate details off of what we already know. So just getting to see like the Jawas act as like creatures and getting to see little insights into their culture, it's so strange, and I normally would not say that's like welcome or necessary, but just getting to see that the Jawas are both entirely competent and also insanely short-sighted and selfish little creatures that just kind of just do bad things for their own benefit. Like, it makes it just kind of wonderful. Like, they get this item that means that's apparently like one of the most coveted food delicacies in their culture, and they immediately just tear it open and just start licking it. I'm like,
yeah.
It's just like it tells you a lot about them, even though you probably didn't necessarily ever want to know that much about them.
Well, the thing I really appreciate the show, just simply 2 episodes in, is I like how stripped down and minimalist the entire show is. You can, it is so insanely competently directed, and it is so, how can I put this? Controlled in almost every single aspect of it, because it knows the main character has no face. So it's like, okay, everything has to be expressed through non-verbal communication. Everything the landscape itself has to be a character. Other characters have to be the source of communication, of drama. And I was like, that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Because the thing I liked about the Jawa stuff was that it didn't just show you this really interesting corner of the universe, but it also kind of said something about the Mandalorian himself and his relationship with traditions, and just him developing the patience to deal with people non-violently. It's like, oh, that's kind of clever. It's never really spoken to you that he's slowly becoming a little bit softer, but it's all done through action. There's no like, I am becoming more softer. I now, like, the baby Yoda has changed me. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that's really good. I kind of miss this kind of old classic filmmaking where it's just everything is through action, not through lazy writing.
Yeah, there's nothing lazy about The Mandalorian. Like, I'm already convinced that, like, half the people working on the show are gonna get, like, just elevated inside Lucasfilm, and, like, so someone's probably gonna walk up to Jon Favreau and be like, hey, do you want to direct the KOTOR movie for us?
Yeah.
Or get Dave Filoni to be the writer or something like that, because I haven't met a single person that hasn't liked The Mandalorian yet. I've seen, like, 2 people that are, like, iffy on it just because they don't think the face stuff, the lack of a face is capable of working, but every single person I know loves The Mandalorian. I've never seen Star Wars fans this happy.
I think it's also driven in it's like a big fire snuffing out the smaller fire deal, because I think because of the sequel trilogy, people see, and this is mainly from like the headlines I've seen, where it's like, oh, this is what Star Wars needs to be. This is what real Star Wars is. I think a lot of the positive judgment also comes from the fact that it allows people to negatively judge the sequels even more.
Well, there you go. I mean, but
yeah,
it's not even just the fanboys, because there's also a huge like normie audience that's embracing it too.
That's
like,
true. Yeah.
Walk up to anyone on the street and be like, do you know what Baby Yoda is? And there's a good chance they'll be like, oh yeah, it's so cute, I love him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I feel like the show is also probably the best. It feels like, and this is in the nicest way possible, it feels like the greatest fan film project ever made.
Kinda, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Even more so than, like, The Force Awakens, which is kind of sort of doing the same thing, but this actually feels like it's taking everything people want and then finding a way to just make it functional. And I'm like, I have no idea how you found a way to do that.
Yeah, well, it literally felt like, ever seen that, I can't even call it a short film. It was literally just a shot of Boba Fett coming out of the Sarlacc pit.
I haven't, but I'd like to see it. I'm sure it's cool.
It's like 5 seconds, just him coming out, and it's just like, and the Slave One shows up and picks him up, and that's it. And I was like, that one shot of Boba Fett standing in the desert says everything about how much the people making it deeply loves the character and their understanding of the genre and of the character. And I was kind of like, that feeling is fully realized in this show. That sort of Western, that sort of chaotic nature of the new frontier, that's kind of a corner in the original Star Wars. It's like, wow, they get to take that one thing that they really, really like, and they're really, really having fun with it. And it's kind of, I was deeply smitten by that just from 2 episodes in.
Oh yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as you get farther into it.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, like, if that's what people are very nostalgic towards of the Star Wars, the original trilogies. It's kind of like, I'm really glad I'm not making something Star Wars, because I grew up with the prequels, which would mean my nostalgic equivalent of a fan film high budget thing would be people talking about space taxes for like 8 episodes.
Well, there you go.
And trade agreements, bad green screens. Oh my god. That was something I really, really wish Episode 9 had.
I don't remember what I was writing about this on my blog a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember where I was writing about it, or what I was talking about, but I was just thinking about, like, imagine if someone did like a slice of life Star Wars series where there wasn't actually like a major conflict going on. It was just people hanging out in the universe without like a major drama going on. I was curious if something like that could even work.
Yeah, it's kind of The Mandalorian if you think about it.
Kind of, but there's I mean, I don't want to say what happens in it, but there's always there is, at least within the first 2 episodes, which kind of sets up what the main story is. There is at least this implied sense that there's conflicts in the galaxy, even though this comes pretty dang close to having just kind of a slice of life where most of the time when Mando doesn't really seem to have any sort of conflict with most of the places he goes.
Yeah,
but
there's a mundane quality that I kind of dig about the show. Here's just him getting the ship back from his ports. It's not, oh no, there's some sort of evil mercenary union that's taken over this side of the galaxy. They've got a space weapon that can blow up moons or something. It's just him. He's getting angry. There's spend like a full action sequence of him getting pissed off at the Jawas and trying to climb on the sand crawlers.
I'd love to see like a cop drama set on Coruscant that's just like two Coruscant cops just going about their day.
I'd love to see a really, really slow moving film about Jar Jar Binks after like he's just like, we just started a war and it's just him drinking like like Logan, kind of like that with Jar Jar Binks. Like
I could imagine like some sort of nihilistic art film about like Jar Jar Binks running around and doing all this stuff while just horrifying things are happening as a consequence of his actions. I could see that.
Yeah, imagine that, like, and he started like a shelter for like war orphans because he technically started the Clone Wars. He's seeing like clone troopers around him. Like maybe he had like a squad of clone troopers that's been looking after him since the Clone Wars. But now that the war is over, and they're still looking after him, because they have accelerated aging, they're getting much older than him. And now he's like suffering from the emotional consequences of not only having started a war, but having these people that were born to like fight and then die effectively with no future, with shorter lifespans.
Oh my
Imagine
gosh.
that.
That is interesting. I can't imagine that Disney would ever license that, but that would be interesting.
Get like James Mangold to like direct it. Like here's a 8-episode series called Binks.
I mean, at one point he was signed to direct the Boba Fett film, but then they sidelined all of the Star Wars story projects.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine that would be like, just imagine like the poster could be like in Blade Runner, right? It's just like it's Binks sitting by like an office with like a whiskey, looking out like his window and his flying cars. Neon. You can have like was it Twi'lek or Twi'lek?
Twi'lek, I think.
A naked Twi'lek, like in like Ana de Armas in Blade Runner 2049, where it's like holographic, and he's looking at it, and he's like sadly masturbating.
Oh my god!
Tear goes down his eyes. He's got like an elderly clone trooper. Because like Tamara Morrison's like an old man now, right? So you can just get like him, and he's just in the background, you know, sitting like on a sofa, like heartbroken too. Imagine that.
Someone called Denis Villeneuve. Tell him he's a rich man.
Oh, that would be my like ideal like Star Wars project.
Well, there you
Imagine
go.
it. Binks, coming 2021, an 8-part political thriller / psychological drama.
Get the True Detective showrunner on this crap. We'll make it an HBO series.
Yeah, we'll get Mahershala Ali to play Jar Jar Binks. Perfect.
Beautiful.
People will be like, "Oh my god!" And then we can get the original guy to come back during like the flashbacks.
That guy's on suicide watch. I don't think he's gonna come back.
Oh no.
Well, I mean,
well,
did you hear about that from like a couple of years ago?
I heard he was really like heartbroken. I didn't know he was on suicide watch.
He's not actively on suicide watch, but he had apparently after the movies came out, he briefly had a bad emotional breakdown. So.
What?
I mean that.
Oh.
People are vicious, man. People, we wonder why George Lucas sold these movies. It's because you get criticized enough, it just destroys you.
I thought this was like this wouldn't really happen now with like social media, but what like
not recently. I didn't mean to say this is like breaking or something, but he.
Even back in like 1999 and like 2001.
I'll find the article on this and send it to you on Twitter, just so I'm not misquoting it. But
thanks. Oh my god.
But yeah, it's sad.
Anyway. You just like at the grocery store and someone's like, "You ruined Star Wars." It's like, I'm just here to buy some baked beans. Why? Well, screw you.
Yeah, I mean, the kid from the Phantom Menace? What's his name?
Jake Lloyd.
Yeah, I heard he like burned all his Star Wars toys after that movie came out because he got bullied.
What?
Yeah, he got bullied so badly.
But what? From fans or from like normal people? I mean, from like industry people.
People within his like personal life, I think.
Oh, what?
Yeah, like because he was like he was a school kid at the time, so he probably was like, "You were the guy in Phantom Menace. How dare you?"
God damn. He could be like, "Screw you. I was in Jingle All the Ways too." Like, fuck you. That gives me. Oh my god, that's so sad.
He was? I didn't know he was in Jingle All the Way too.
I mean, the first one.
Oh, okay. No.
With Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Is that what's called? Jingle All the Ways?
That's a good movie.
Yeah, that gives him a free pass for me.
Well, yeah, I never blame an actor for their movie sucking. It's.
Oh damn, that's a bloody documentary in itself.
Oh yeah.
The life of Jake Lloyd and the guy who played Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, that Disney would never produce it, but I would love to see the indie documentary of just my interview with Jake Lloyd and just talking one-on-one interview with him, just talk candidly.
Yeah, god damn. I'm really surprised Hayden Christensen came out alright then.
Well, I think his only other movie credit after Revenge of the Sith was Outcast with Nicolas Cage, so.
But he's alright, like in interviews, he's just like, yeah, like, he's normal. He even went to like one of the Star Wars fan events, Star Wars celebrations.
Well, the thing about Star Wars historically has always been that it's been like a death knell for careers. Like, it typecasts you immediately as the guy from Star Wars. Just basically why like everyone that isn't Harrison Ford is like never really had much else going on outside of like animated stuff.
Well, I mean, I feel really grateful for bloody Ian McGregor and Natalie Portman because I think they're the only people who came out unscathed.
Well, McGregor took like a decade to get his career going because he's like in stuff like Doctor Sleep and
yeah,
that Winnie the Pooh movie from last year, and he's done stuff like that where he's really good, and people kind of independently understand that he's good because it's like, oh, he's the guy from Trainspotting, so he's got something to work with. But like even like a lot of those guys just haven't bounced back unless they were already pre-established, like Liam Neeson or Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, well, I think also Ian McGregor's Scottish, so he's got a pretty big after Trainspotting, he's got such a reputable name in the British film industry that he probably was able to immediately bounce back into some good projects.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they got a decent paycheck for that, but I'm sure it took a while. I'd have to look at all their credits just to figure out what that is.
Yeah, he wasn't like, I'm gonna be in Jumper, the bloody David Goyer teleportation movie. Do you remember that? That was
I have a distinct memory of Jumper from like watching commercials on early 2000s DVDs. So
yeah,
I never saw it, but it's like
that was like Hayden Christensen's like final like attempt, I guess.
Like I have such distinct memories of early 2000s movies that I never saw, like Stealth, but like it's like all these like bad action movies that no one watched when they came out and no one's watched since, but you'll find them in like used DVD bins. But
like next starring Nicolas Cage and I'm trying to remember other ones. Blade Trinity.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. Do you know that like that film has one of the best credits in it ever?
I've only seen the first two Blade movies because their reputation precedes them, but
it's worth watching Blade Trinity just for the credits because after all the names finish, it has the word full stop. Get it?
What?
Word. Yeah, just word. Because that's what people say, right? It's cool people. They say word.
My gosh, the early 2000s were a cultural wasteland.
Oh, it's so good. Just word. Like you see after you see like made by who, made by this. Oh, this film was not based on a true story. This provide production created this amount of jobs.
Yeah.
Oh, using Sony like music publishing whatever, and then just word.
I had the same experience a couple months ago when I went back and watched an old DVD of Dragon Ball Z, and you just see like this like trailer of like the Dragon Ball Broly movie, and has this embarrassing soundtrack of early 2000s heavy metal music, and then like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like all these things that I'm glad stayed in the early 2000s and haven't popped their head up since.
Like pointless, just rock me, like bloody, like in Daredevil, where they have wake me up in time.
Exactly. But yeah, we're just about to hit the 2-hour mark, and I'm
wow. Well.
So I think. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Mandalorian when you finish that, but I think we need to call it a night.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This went by really quickly.
Sure thing. I dig your channel a lot. That's why I wanted to bring you on, because I thought you would bring a very sensible review as opposed to some other people, and that I'm probably having a full-scale meltdown right now in the aftermath of Rise of Skywalker, so...
Well, J.J. Abrams did ruin my childhood.
Oh, of course. I can never watch Return of the Jedi again. It's been ruined forever.
Yeah, I can't look at space taxes the same way, knowing that Palpatine came back and didn't create any new trading deals.
Well, there you go. Have a good night, man.
Well, lovely. Thank you for having me, man. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for coming on. Bye.
Bye. Adios.